All right, we are live for episode 32, which is going to be just a recap episode. Today was the second day of the March NARBC in Tinley Park, and my family and I went. We always do, and so I thought it'd be cool to do just a recap episode of what all was going on. There was actually some really cool lizard stuff at this show. I was talking to the folks in the Herpetoculture Network chat today and yesterday after the auction, and I thought it was a really diverse show. And people kind of give them a hard time sometimes for an ARBC about it's tons of ball pythons and so on and so forth, and there were, which is an industry standard kind of thing, but there were a whole bunch of diverse tables. There were quite a few folks that had inverts, a handful of dart frog tables. I saw quite a few different monitors, which was not the norm for any RBC. You always have Mike Stefani of Mike's Monitors, but to have folks that had a few different species, a few different things available. I saw Sim Container there, which was, I don't recall seeing them in recent shows. So that was really cool. They had some fun stuff. They always have really cool animals. And yeah, there was just a lot of really neat stuff. It was a good time. So the auction was pretty killer. Ryan McVeigh of VivTech, he said a few words about Leland Ward, who passed away. Leland's family donated a lychee from his collection to the auction, and that was auctioned off. They gave it to Ryan. He brought it to the auction because his dad was able to attend, but his fiance wasn't able to be there. And so Ryan said a few words, and then they auctioned off that lizard. I hang out at VivTech's table. We've been friends with Ryan and Erica for a long time, so I got to hang out and check out that lizard kind of as the auction was going on. It was super cool, and it was really neat that it came from Leland, and so that was pretty cool. Ryan was showing me some pictures. Hopefully, they'll be posting some of those pretty soon. But he got a Mertens from Mike Stefani and had a very large enclosure set up for that lizard, and that enclosure was from Leland. So that was really cool. That was a really nice thing to see. The last, I can't remember if it was the last auction or maybe the one before. We raised quite a bit of money for Leland to help him when he really needed it. And he was a good dude. And it was really cool that everybody participated at that time to help him. And then again, donated an animal and raised a bunch of money in his memory. So I thought that was really neat. I lucked out in the auction, and I'll post some pictures here as things go on different social media stuff. But I ended up with a Coleonyx out of the silent auction. For those of you that don't know, there is a live auction portion at NARBC and a silent auction portion to raise money for USARK. And the silent auction this time was huge. It's usually cool. Like, I think the silent auction is cool. I always enjoy doing that. You see kind of oddball stuff there, but this time, which was odd for Tinley, the auction itself in March was huge. And so the silent auction was even bigger than usual. Tinley, stereotypically, October is like the big show, and March is kind of, it's cool, but it's not like the craziness that is October. This time, March filled the convention center. They had a huge auction, which was really well attended. They raised a ton of money. The folks from USARK Florida were there. They spoke a little bit, raised some money specifically for that. Mike Stefani of Mike's Monitors donated a Mertens to the regular auction, and then donated a Mertens to an auction that was specifically held, kind of a mini segment during that, to raise money just for USARK Florida. So that was really cool. And then I also, for those of you who don't know auction etiquette, for silent auctions, you just write your bid, and then you can walk around, grab a drink, hang out at the live auction, and you keep writing bids as folks bid against you. And then at the end, when the live auction is done, Phil Goss from USARK usually starts like a 5-10 minute timer, whatever. So you have 5-10 minutes, get in your silent bids, whatever they're going to be, right on the papers. Timer goes off, and the USARK volunteers highlight the high bidder, and that's it. It's just like a test, like pencils down, we're done, right? So the etiquette on that is, if you're going to bid for silent stuff, you should stay until the end of the live auction to know whether or not you won. And every year, folks don't do that. So I would encourage people who attend events like this to kind of maybe ask around, or, it's a little bit of follow the crowd. Like when you see what everybody else is doing, maybe you should kind of do that too, if you don't know. But I, I also don't want to complain too much because I benefited from it. So I was able to get a Paraodura oviceps, the nosy bee ground gecko. I had bid on it anyway in the silent auction, and then someone outbid me, but they chose to leave. And so at the end of the auction, being the next highest bidder, I won it. So that was pretty cool. I was very excited about that. And we have folks in the chat. What's up, everybody? Christopher, how's it going? Wally, I did get abandoned. Yeah, Coleonyx are sweet, man. Chris Painshab from Badlands Herpetoculture has been on and talked about Coleonyx quite a bit, and I saw it in the silent auction. I like raising money for USARK. I like doing stuff. I always buy t-shirts and all that fun stuff, and I think the silent auction is a fun way to do that. And so, of course, I nerd out on more lizard things and ridiculous stuff. I won a two-handled blow-up pool alligator that looks kind of like a rocking horse, but with an awful representation of an alligator face on it. It was just a stupid blow-up thing. There's always stuff like that. NARBC auctions, a big thing is like cookies. People bid crazy money and then just pass cookies around. It's a charity. It's just like fun ways to raise money. And then there's always really cool stuff. I was able to get an amphibian book for Western and Southern Africa, and there were a few really good textbooks in the silent auction, which was pretty cool to see. There's always like memorabilia. This particular NARBC auction had a lot of memorabilia type things. And so there was weird stuff like a t-shirt from when Crutchfield had a children's camp back in like the early 90s or something insane. And then there were like VHS tapes of one of the gecko symposiums from way back when. They had a price list and a little brochure from one of the first dudes to make cages and stuff. Like they had a lot of really cool history things this time. So that was really neat. And then, folks who had those things, paid to have them like framed nice and stuff like that and donated them. So it wasn't just animals and, bidding on a big rack or whatever. There was actually like really cool herpetoculture history type things. So I thought that was a lot of fun. And thank you, Christopher. I appreciate that. And yeah, Wally, that nosy bee ground gecko, man, when I saw that thing, I kind of was camping out a little bit that I signed my name, and then I went back to our table and was goofing around or whatever. The auction's always a super good time, and just lost track of it, wasn't paying attention, and someone outbid me. But like I said, I really lucked out there in the end, and being the second place bidder was able to come home with that. So that was really cool. And then it was just a really good show, man, for March. Like people kind of poo-poo on March, like October is where it's at. And I genuinely agree, being a guy that's from here. But dude, it was a blast. I had a really good time. Got to see a lot of people. Mike Stefani, again, talked to him, had awesome setups with his Mertens and Ackies and everything. Saw Joe Hupp had a cool table, tons really off the wall stuff, which of course you would expect from him. Man, there was tons of stuff, lots of monitors this time. Saw a big pair of white throats. That was super cool. I kind of felt, I didn't feel bad, but it was kind of funny. My son was walking around. Of course, he's looking for turtles because Walter is, a turtle guy. And he saw those white throats and came over to me and was like, "Dad, did you see these white throats? They're huge," or whatever. I was like, "Yeah, it's really cool." And he was like, "Yeah, it's big. It's like almost as big as our Argus. And I was like, hey man, don't like walk by and say that to people. Like that's rude. He was like, it's not that big. It was just funny to hear him say it. It was fun. Yeah, Wally, I agree that March shows. A lot of folks think that having a slow show is a bad thing, and from the selling standpoint, I would understand. If you didn't have the sales, that would suck. But from what Wally was, saying, usually get to talk to people at the end of the day. The fall is super busy. Yeah, I absolutely agree. As I walk around, and of course, I don't sell stuff. I go there to socialize and get a few things that I need for shows or whatever. And then I really like to hang out at the auction and screw around with my friends. Um, I always feel bad in October because like my buddies are there selling or doing whatever they're doing. And then we see each other and it's like, oh, hey, we're going to talk lizards or whatever. But if you're one of my buddies, I probably have, whatever thing we were going to get from one another. And so we're just hanging out. And like, I feel bad because in October it's super busy and I don't want to, like, you're not making sales if you're talking to me and there's this line of people just hanging out, wanting to look at your stuff, but I'm sitting here, just BSing the whole time. So yeah, it is cool when it's a little slower. I want folks to get the sales and I hope they all did well, but it was nice that, we could socialize and hang out and do the stuff that we were doing. Benjamin, I thought I saw you there. You're taller in person. I actually had a bunch of people message me and text me and different stuff and said, hey, I thought I saw you. You probably did. If it was a bald dude with a red beard that looks sort of like me, that was probably me. If you were at the auction, you definitely didn't miss me because I was wearing a VivTech tank top that they gave to my son. And so I was like super pasty white arms, bright red beard. That was definitely me. Yeah, I had several people that were like, oh, I think I saw you walking around. And I was like, dude, why are you messaging me? You should have just grabbed me and said something. I'm the same way. I'm weird like that. I don't usually just walk straight up to people I know on the internet, but not in real life. I don't know. I think that's a hard thing to get around in the social media age because we all talk and message and are in group chats and all these different things and then haven't ever seen each other in real life. Like it's kind of weird. Herpetoculture Network, you scary. Shut up, dude. Just because I yelled at Casey at a hotel at the last Tinley and people thought I was going to fight him in the lobby. And Joe Hupp is that type of person. Yes. Yeah. I actually messaged Joe to come back on and talk Aussie geckos for a summer episode of Lizard Brain. And of course, super cool. Said, yeah, no big deal. Like, good dude. But same way, I walked by, the kids and I saw the table, checked out the geckos, but he had like a small line of customers and kind of did the eye contact, like nod thing. And yeah, I didn't want to interrupt him because he was obviously actually selling geckos. So yeah, it's one of those, like, you kind of make a mental note, like, okay, do 2 laps and then see if his table is not busy or whatever. But I mean, dude, Wally, your table is the same way, man. Like if you're at Sewer Fest, it's, you're doing like every 3rd lap you check and there's still a line or whatever. Because a lot of it's busy shows, which is good. It's a good thing. So I mean, I can come here and socialize in the chat, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, and he's on the side talking to someone like me, feeling guilty talking geckos. Yes, for sure. Christopher, yes, would love more gecko content. Yeah, for sure. I actually have episodes lined up all the way until the weekend of the 4th of July. So that's cool. I have a couple of folks that are coming back to talk different, like Philip from Arids Only is going to come back. And instead of talking Uromastyx this time, we're going to talk Xenogama. So I'm pretty excited about that. And Joe is going to come back and we're just going to talk Aussie geckos. So just folks that I've had on before, and maybe they have a focus, but they have some side projects or whatever. And then we try to keep it, like less than 2 hours or hour and a half. And so a lot of those folks, we couldn't get to everything that they did. And so I'm going to try and bring people back and maybe focus on one or two projects or something like that. Eric Haycraft, I just spoke to him. Really want to talk to him about Scaloporus and his helmeted stuff. So I think that's going to be really cool. So yeah, I definitely have a pretty diverse lineup for, man, probably the next 2 months, maybe 3 months. Everybody, like I keep saying as I have guests on, like everybody's been super cool. They're all more than willing to talk, and everybody has side projects. And so you talk to somebody, it's like, oh, you're the leopard gecko guy, and it's like, oh, actually I have 3 fat tails or whatever. So it's you know it's a fun, I don't know, it's like a fun, like I want to let them talk about what it is that they're excited about, and those conversations usually end up going on forever. And so, like, especially with Philip, and he was like, oh, I also have Xenogama, we should talk about that. And I was like, we're at like an hour and a half, we're going to talk for 3 hours, dude, like let's do another episode. And he's super cool. He said of course he would come do it. So that is going to be a lot of fun. Justin Munsterman is a guy I definitely need to interview. I will keep that in mind. I absolutely will. He has stuff no one has. Dude, I saw stuff at this show that fell into that. There was a lot of random stuff, man. I went to Exotic Empire and was hanging out talking to them, and I ended up getting a Phrynoidus juxtaspur, what we think is a juxtaspur. They typically come in as a spura, and they're giant Malaysian toads. And there's only 2 species in the genus. And when you key them down, it's based on the large parotid gland on the side of their head, whether or not it's one solid gland or if it's in tubercles. And then the juxtaspur is the truly giant, and the aspera is like giant compared to toads, right? And so what we now think is juxtaspur, I was able to get one of those at their table and speak with them for quite a while, which is really cool. Bill Stewart, another guest on the podcast from WPS Reptiles, he was helping them out. And so we hung out, talked weird amphibians and then weird lizards for a little while. They had a whole bunch of cat geckos. They had a whole bunch of flying geckos. They had all been in country for quite a long time. They looked great. I was really excited to talk to them because they do bring in import stuff, which I know some folks are weird about. But they actually, when I spoke to them, brought it in ahead of time, sat on it, had everything set up, looking good, hydrated, doing well, and picked and chose, like, these are the things that are doing well, and then chose to bring those to the expo, which I was very happy to hear. It was great to see. I was very interested in how they were doing that and how they picked their animals and things like that. And we sat and talked cat geckos for quite a bit, as we were just picking brains on different stuff that's from Malaysia and that whole part of the world, and just different things, like how, because of course we do educational shows, and so that was my whole, I wanted a giant toad because kids like giant things. And so we started talking about, oh well, because we display things and have a facility of different levels of care, things that can be kept more on the crested gecko side, room temperature thing. It was a lot of fun to sit there and nerd out. And then I went back today, after sitting in the hotel room last night, reading up on the Phrynoidus genus, and was talking to him. And I was like, hey, I keyed out my toad, and I think it's juxtaspur, not aspera. And here's all these things. And we were sitting there talking, and they were like, yes, here's a card, email us. It would be super cool. And it was one of those, like, I'm pretty sure that the toads were mislabeled, but that's what the toads were given to them from the importer as. And it's a weird genus. There's only 2 species, and it is, when you read literature on it, they're easily confused. And so we're just sitting there, talking, and of course I know Bill Stewart, who was working with them, and just kind of nerding out. And they were super cool. They they weren't offended or anything. We sat and they were like, they come from the importer and we're trying to figure it out and key things down and so on and so forth. And we just had like a really cool back and forth discussion. Um, I I was not like mad or anything. I was totally happy with the price that I paid and how we did all that stuff on the business side. It was just really neat that we got to hang out and I was like, oh hey, this is what I think. I read all this stuff and what do you guys think? And they immediately were like, yeah, dude, email us. The lady working behind gave me her cell phone. She's like, yo, text me if you find that article on your phone. They were super receptive, just very cool people. And so I had a lot of fun with that. I was really happy to see that. Um, you, I don't know, you stereotypically sometimes get tables of people that like flip or import or like they get a bad rap, and sometimes it's deserved, and there's not good experiences with that kind of thing or what have you. But it was one of those things where much like all of this, they were recommended to me. Hey, check this out. This is cool. This is what I think. And I had been looking for these toads for quite some time. I had seen them online and I could just never find folks who got them in. And like, I'm friends with Billy and he was talking to me and went there and it was wonderful. And then figured that out Saturday night. I came back on Sunday. Great. I don't know. It was just really nice to have that experience that, they were nerds like me and were very receptive and open. And we sat and talked geckos and just chilled out. It was really cool. They like cooler conditions. Da-da-da. Yeah. Yeah. That was our big thing. Because we have the facility. So all of our, anything with water and a lot of weight is in the basement of our facility. And I live in the Midwest, of course. And so in the wintertime, it does get a little cooler. And so at the front being street side of the basement, it gets pretty cold. Like Midwestern brumating colubrids cold. And so the only things that I have waterborne in that section of the basement are North American natives, usually Illinois specific natives. My snapping turtles overwinter in that section, things like that. And then as you move into the basement, things are either heated or not, depending on what it is they need. But it maintains a pretty high humidity level. Obviously having, I don't even know now, 1,550 gallon plus totes down there. So I was pretty excited to set that up. He currently is chilling in the bottom of what will be a South American biotope. Doesn't have any animals in it at the time at the moment, so I wanted to give him a big water space so that toad's chilling in there. But I have another, I want to say it's a 200. So that tote I'm gonna plant and do a concrete mixing tub as a water fixture, and I think that toad is just going to get its own setup. And so, I mean, it's like a 8-inch plus, like it's a huge toad. So I don't think, I mean, it's going to look a little crazy, but I don't think it's unreasonable to put it in that 200. That's probably 4 by 3 by maybe 18 inches tall. I don't know. It's a huge trough. I'll get measurements and pictures and all that good stuff. I know it's amphibian nerds, but building and planting and stuff like that, it would all kind of jive if you were doing flying geckos or cat geckos or different things like that. So we'll find out. Any tips on the cat geckos you would like to share? I've struggled. So the cat geckos, we sat and talked quite a bit at the table about those, and I was very interested to hear that the folks at Exotic Empire, they do not supplement cat geckos. They have found that cat geckos struggle to digest supplements, and even just eating regular gut-loaded insects, they will pass calcium pellets. And so, whereas even other animals that are from that part of the world, flying geckos or different things like that, even stuff that comes in the same import, they hydrate and supplement and all the things that you would expect. With cat geckos, they do not. They still feed gut-loaded insects, and the cat geckos still pass calcium pellets and things sometimes, but they have noticed that they don't have the digestion issues if they don't dust and supplement the insects in addition to the gut load. So we were sitting talking, and because I'm very interested in cat geckos because they're very slow moving. The problem for doing shows is they are crepuscular to nocturnal. They don't really want to do anything with us out in the daylight. But what I like about animals like that is that if I travel to do shows during the winter or colder weather, they can chill out and it's not going to stress them out to just, ride in the van at a comfortable temperature for me. And so I was very interested in that. And, they would just be a display or something where if, I could have it like on my hand and show kids and explain them, but they don't, get to touch it or whatever, like they would have crested. They're just not that kind of animal. And so we sat and we were talking and we were elbow deep in lizard nerdery. And yeah, that was their tidbit, was the supplementation for them is very, very fine line. And so they gut load insects and do all the things that you would expect, but they don't dust or do anything separate. And so I was really interested to hear that. Yeah. Yeah. See, I, excuse me. I had no idea that the supplementation would be such an issue, which I was really glad that she brought that up because I just would have started doing it like I do with everything. And yeah, they've really struggled with it. And so that was definitely something to be aware of. And for those of you who are listening to the episode or in the chat or what have you, if you haven't checked out cat geckos, they are ridiculous. They quite literally move like a cat slinks along, where they like stretch out and it looks like they're slow-mo in it. They're just super cool. Like they look cool anyway, but how they move and how they act is very unique from what you would think for a little skittering gecko. And so I was really interested to hear how they keep. And of course, they're like most folks, that a lot of imported things, it's hydration and things like that. And so before I forget, Picta are great to shows. Perfect for, yes, I I have one of your Pictas and I do use it for shows, Wally. You are absolutely right. They are great to sit in little kids' hands. They like to sit and hang out. I am hoping that, because I like little things, right? Because little hands, and every little kid wants to hold a bearded dragon or a blue tongue skink or something like that. And then even the little pricklies of claws that they feel, nope, I can't, I can't do that. And so when you get things like cresteds, soft feet, a leopard gecko or something like that, if you have a quote unquote good group, so little kids with a little bit of self-control or maybe that just listen to directions a little better, it's nice to pick does Cresty, little stuff that can kind of go slow, do its own thing. You don't have to go straight to beardies, so that's super cool. Was I don't know, it was really cool to see that type of thing. There were quite a few different tables that had an assortment of things along that line. Bunches of gargs, of course, lots of lychees, less cresteds than I expected. I thought there would be more at the show. There were, several tables that still had quite a few, but I don't feel like there were as many as in the past. I also saw very few bearded dragon tables, which I was kind of surprised by. A few morphs here and there, but not nearly what you would expect at a show this size. So that was a little weird. I saw quite a few oddball snakes. That was exciting. A lot of folks doing, I mean, there always have been folks that were doing stuff outside of balls, but way more colubrids this time. Apodora, blood pythons, Borneos, the whole short tail complex was represented. So that was really neat. Not nearly as many retics and things. Actually did see a few berms, which hasn't historically been a thing. So I'm cool with that. I personally am a fan of big snakes, and I want there to continue to be availability for folks. I just, I want it to be smart, and so I'm happy to see that there was like one or two folks that had it and not 40. And so if you wanted it and could do it, then you could get it, but it wasn't just flung out on a table, that kind of thing. I actually didn't see very many Australian, not very many carpets. Few geckos here and there. My son was pointing out Stropharis to me, pointed out some Nephrus to me. I want to say both of those might have actually been just at Joe's table. He might have been the only one. There were a few hognose. For those that don't know, hognose are an endangered species in Illinois, and so it requires a permit to keep those. And so Tinley usually only has a few tables that have hognose morphs. It's not usually a very popular thing here because of the rules around that. There are still some folks that sell it because lots of folks come from Wisconsin and Indiana and travel quite a ways to go to an NARBC show. And so they sell a lot of it to folks who don't live in Illinois. But there probably weren't nearly as many hognose morphs and breeders as folks would think nationwide for a show this size. I don't know. There was very few turtles. My son was kind of disappointed. The Turtle Mafia folks were there, as always. They represented. They have the Moremus genus, which Walter is a huge fan of. So we went by and said hi and hung out with them a little bit. Few like random kind of, flipper table, maybe not so great type things for turtles and tortoises. Not a whole lot of representation there. There was one super cool table who I got a card from, and I'm going to completely blank on his name now because I don't have my cards in front of me when I should. He had a Fly River, which was awesome. He had several super cool monitors. So I need to find some of those folks and pick their brain. I want to try and get somebody on to talk about tree monitors because that's one of the few varanids I don't have a lot of experience with. And so I have some brain picking questions for those. So we'll try and find somebody for that in the future. I have a lot of varanid experience, just not with those, which doesn't make sense because when it comes to varanid nerds, tree monitors are like super popular, top of the list for folks because of the really pretty colors. It just never really worked for me. When I was in college and got into arboreal things, I went really big chameleons instead of going tree monitors. And so I don't know, it just didn't ever come to fruition in my collection. So I'll have to find somebody going forward to get us an episode for that. What else did we have? VivTech. That was my rocking my stupid shirt at the auction. If anybody saw that, I'm sure there are Facebook pictures floating around somewhere. They launched a controller product. It's sort of like push sensors, and it's a similar idea. The little pucks that measure, humidity and temperature and different things. And then they have a gateway where you can connect all of the sensors to it. And then they also have a camera system that they are packaging together. And talking to Ryan, he has a whole bunch of things coming down the pike in relation to that camera system. And they're going to be trying to do things based off of infrared, based off of heat, trying to get folks just more safety measures, as opposed to like people think of the camera thing and they want to nerd out and watch animals that are nocturnal or stress easily, or if you're a super paranoid person and you want to watch your incubator if you're on vacation or something. All of that is already, makes sense for the camera market. And in talking to Ryan, he and Erica are also looking at the safety aspect from the camera market for the handful of stories we've all probably heard on social media in the last few months where folks have had fires and some folks have lost fairly significant collection chunks or collections. And Ryan was talking to me yesterday and today both that he wants to try and figure out a system where if you had that camera and had an option for infrared, you could set temperature alarms and things of that nature. And the technology nowadays, it's progressed to the point where it isn't that expensive. And so he's hoping that they can try to incorporate that into that camera launch that they did, along with the sensors and different things that they launched at NARBC this weekend. So that's pretty cool. I was really interested to hear that. Obviously, I have a facility, so those things are pretty important to me. It's not at my home. It's only a couple blocks away, but that still makes a really big difference. I have, of course, a lot of very large lizards and very large turtles and tortoises, so I have some pretty serious heat setups. And that's everybody's number one fear, is something like that failing. I know people think, heat cable and heat tape and racks and all that, because those are the things that we most commonly hear. But for somebody like me, my big worry is if there was some way for a monitor to knock something over, or a tortoise, and they will, because they're huge and clumsy, and so it's high heat and it's just a nightmare scenario. And so I was really happy to hear that there are more products coming to folks to be able to set those things up. So that was really cool. I actually right near the VivTech table, well, sort of near, I guess. The Bio Dude had some really cool setups, and at the show, you could actually buy the whole setup, which I thought was really neat. And then for these different display setups, they had all the products next to them to help you recreate it. So that was really cool. I am a really big fan of the Bio Dudes stuff, the things that they offer. And if you follow them on social media, they are very much a company that teaches, I guess. I don't know how to say that better. They'll explain to you how to use their products to achieve the look you see on their social media. Whereas, a lot of times you get a plant company or a light company or whatever, and they have this professional, amazing picture. And it's like, with our light, you could do this. And it's like, well, that light and a greenhouse and an amazing ability to build an enclosure and a beautiful chameleon or whatever, like it's never that simple. And to see companies like BioDude and places like that actually go through and are like, oh no, here's the layers, here's the plant, this is what we did, here's leaf litter and things like that. It's really cool. I had a really good time checking out their stuff. I'm a nerd for that kind of stuff. I like to build things, and so I love checking out places like that. There were actually quite a few tables that had plants, so that was really cool. Josh's Frogs, of course, they always have a super cool setup, and so they had bunches of stuff there. But I saw several tables that just had different types of plants. Some were more crafty, like display things if you were just keeping house plants, but quite a few of them were cuttings and things meant to take back to your enclosure and to help set up. So that was a lot of fun. There were only a few bioactive isopod type setups and tables. It wasn't nearly as prevalent at this show as I feel like those things have been in the past. I don't know if that was because maybe those things are more centered around the folks who are going to do dart frogs. At giant shows like this, there's only usually a handful of people that have that kind of thing. Josh's Frogs obviously being the most well-known. But yeah, I didn't see nearly as many, like a table full of isopods. There wasn't nearly as much of that as I kind of expected. Quite a few invert tables, which is always cool. My daughter Indira, of course, that's her favorite, so we have to go check all those out. And they had a great selection, really cool prices. I was really happy to see that. Lots of slings, lots of captive bred stuff, not a lot of import things, which was really nice. Ooh, phase cabinet for that. This has nothing to do with lizards at all. But in my family, we have to give a shout out to Phase Cabinet. I encourage all of you to check them out on social media. They do, I don't know how to explain it, like crafts that are centered around taxidermy and skulls and crystals and all sorts of that kind of thing. If you're into that, my kids are super into it. I love all the stuff that they make. They are very talented people. They typically donate small things to the silent auction, and I almost always try to win it or win it. And that is almost always part of my kids' Christmas presents, especially my daughter. She is such a huge fan of them. And of course, they were there again this year and had awesome stuff. And so we went by. Just really cool people. They're really nice. They're very talented. They're fun to hang out and talk to. They were right across from Adeline, and she did another painting so at every NARBC, Adeline does a painting at the expo. So while someone, usually she helps man the table, but she is actually painting during the expo. So you can go by and see her progression and all these different things. And then that painting is donated to the auction that night. She's just awesome. She's an incredibly talented person, and she did another one, of course, for this auction that was wonderful. And so those tables, Terra Tiger Studios, different things like that, they're all usually kind of sorted together. Emily Burke, she does a lot of artwork, and so those folks are all usually kind of near each other, and they had super cool stuff. A whole bunch of very talented people who also happen to be just nice people to hang out with and talk to, and are all reptile nerds of some kind. So it's not like, I know some shows they have people who are selling stuff and they're not actually like into the hobby. They're just there to pitch their junk or whatever. These people are not that. They are very talented in some sort of artistic or craft, genre. And then they're also reptile nerds. And so they usually couple the two together. And so it's really cool to be able to sit there and talk, earrings or whatever that my daughter thought was cool, and then have those folks be like, oh, and then I went and bought a garter snake over here. Like, they're actually in our crowd. So Wally says, good selection. I was surprised at the number of gargoyles. Yeah, they're I would almost say, like, by number of tables, there were probably more gargoyles than cresteds. A few tables had like an 8-foot table of cresteds. So there was a lot of animals, but I would bet there were more tables selling gargoyles than there were tables selling cresteds, which I was really surprised by. And there were a good number of tables selling leechies too. And that really surprised me as well. That not necessarily the number of tables, but I'm always interested in how things are priced, or how, I don't know, how prices work in the reptile market. So leechies have maintained a very high price tag, especially as the animals get larger. And I've always thought it was kind of strange that when you're at shows, and so you have like a table full of adult animals, and they're all very expensive. I don't know. I think that's a little bit weird. Like, do you have a table full of adult animals because you can't sell them? And then wouldn't the market fluctuation say that the price should go down? Or, because I'm not a part of the market, so I don't actually know. Like, today at 5 p.m. Sunday, when Tinley was over and I just didn't see it, maybe that table was empty, and I didn't know that. But that market is weird to me. It's very much predicated on locality, and I don't feel like I know enough about it. But the fact that they maintain their pricing, I've always found very interesting. Because I don't, well, I guess it does kind of make sense, because I don't hear fun things about breeding them. It's not a pleasant experience for anyone involved, including the geckos. So I don't know. I'm interested in that market. We're gonna have to dig somebody up to come talk to us about leechies, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, gargs are really killing it right now. Yeah, and that gargs, folks in the chat are talking up gargs. Yeah, the whole market for gargs is that I've never heard anything bad. I think that's why, like, you always, like, there's a giant market for cresteds, and then people, oh, they're derpy or they lose their tail. Like, they want to make fun of that market because we make fun of ball pythons or whatever. I don't hear that about the garg market, and it also kind of does maintain a little bit better prices. than maybe the crested market does, but not crazy to somebody like me, crazy, like the lychee market. And so maybe that it's a little more accessible, maybe, is, I guess, how I would kind of phrase that, I suppose. But yeah, man, it was a really cool show. I was really happy to get out and see everybody. It was this is the first one that I would say feels post COVID, I guess. It This was what I thought, when you, it's like, we're going to Tinley, we got to get the hotel room and do all this stuff. And it was exactly how it was, or it felt pre-COVID. So that's pretty cool. Dragon Lair. Anyone there with location? Leopard geckos, not morphs. Yes, I did see at least one set of Iranian leopard geckos. And I want to say that was at Sim Container's table, but I'm not 100% positive now that I think about it. But they had all kinds of goofy stuff. They had captive bred tokays, color morphs tokays, crazy monitors, of course, because they've always got super cool monitors. And I'm pretty sure they were the ones that had the Iranians. I don't think I saw anybody else though that had specifics besides regular leopard geckos. There actually weren't a ton of leopard geckos there, to be honest. And that was weird too, because in the silent auction, the leopard geckos didn't really have very high bids on them. There were actually some folks walking around talking about that. As I was walking the silent auction, the boas didn't get very high bids either, which was a little weird because there were some like really high end, nice boas and some really nice leopard geckos. And I don't know if maybe folks just think the silent auction is like the lower end stuff. I'm not sure what was causing that. But it just didn't seem like they were getting the big bids. There was even like weird stuff, like Applegate animals, like different gophers and stuff, and even that, like, it took a little bit. Like the one set of Applegate animals. For those that don't know, NARBC is run by Brian Potter and Bob Ashley, and they participate in the auction. Brian usually does the auctioneering. Bob is up there, helping out, and then Phil Goss of USARK is kind of the third spoke of that. The Applegates, I was checking those out. I don't really breed, so having a pair of Applegates, like, I think they're cool and they're beautiful, but it doesn't really make sense for my collection. But I'm definitely going to go look at them because they're amazing. They really didn't start to kick up in price until Bob Ashley went over and bid on those. Like, these are amazing, I'm bidding on them. And then that kind of got people to pay attention a little bit. But the boas never really took off in the silent auction, and there were at least 4 leopard geckos, 2 of which were adults that were beautiful. And I bid on one of them at one point just because I thought it'd be cool to be able to show kids a totally orange leopard gecko. And they ended up bidding up close to their show value, but I don't think they went over. So it was different. You kind of can't get away from the fact that ball pythons are what brings big money at those auctions. Breeders will purposely put in animals that they know will help other folks who are working on major projects to try and raise money for USARK. That's actually a really cool thing. I assume that breeder probably has another one of those, or has help in that project for themselves. But like, you can hear, because I know a little bit about ball pythons, but I don't know enough to be in that conversation. But you can hear people talking at the tables and in the auction of like, oh, well, you could make that, or I need this. Like, they're actually putting stuff in the auction that is helpful to other people, so that they will help raise money. That's a really cool part of their community. Is, obviously they do have very high end breeders and things like that, but when it comes to donating to the auction and stuff, they do it with a purpose. Like they put in things that would bring a lot of money for other folks. So that was really neat. I right now, the, like, quote unquote big money donator on the lizard side of things is Mike Stefani. Obviously, we don't have a whole lot of lizard nerds that contribute on the bigger scale to the USARK auction, but we also are in a part of the country where we don't really get a whole lot of chameleons and stuff, which are probably higher end. And I actually don't really see, other than when Mike started donating Mertens, which of course are very high dollar, and he's trying to help raise money. So that's super cool. I don't really see monitors donated all that often. And I don't see morph tegus. So if you were, trying to raise money or whatever, I'm just trying to think of like higher dollar things that people donate. You don't really see it as often. And I don't know that I've seen geckos donated in a long time to the actual auction itself. So I don't know if, like, maybe, I don't know, the lizard side of the crowd is, they always represent in the silent auction. There's always cool lizards in the silent auction, but you don't see as many in the main auction. You do see a lot of really cool enclosures in the main auction, which is weird because I feel like most people that are bidding on those are not putting snakes in them. They're probably putting cool lizards in them because they're really neat enclosures. And like dubiaroaches.com, they donated $5,000, like a voucher for $5,000 of roaches. Like no snake dude is bidding on that. That's a lizard nerd, and that was amazing. Timberline always donates a huge voucher for feeders, and so of course that's going to be lizard nerds. So I don't know why there seems to be like that tilt toward the snake nerds. Other than, I mean, obviously the ball python side of raising money is very helpful, but yeah, there's always cool enclosures, but not always cool lizards, which kind of sucks because I would bid on them in a heartbeat. And for most of the time, I'm just hanging out, eating snacks and getting drinks for people because I don't bid on ball pythons or racks or whatever. So I just like to hang out and watch. Yes, the geckos that were on Snakes and Stogies last week were amazing. I am going to continue to make fun of them in our group chat for stealing the cool lizard guy before I could get him. But he's a Florida dude, so Phil had the in. I'll wait a few months and interview him later on down the road. He seemed like a really cool guy, and he had a very cool collection. So I'm not jealous or whatever, but I was super happy that anybody got to see it. It doesn't matter the platform. I was just happy it was a visual platform, and he was cool enough he just kept getting out boxes. Did you guys see? He was like, oh, check this out. And he just kept pulling boxes out. I thought that was awesome. Like, and if you saw in the chat, like there were a handful of people, like a handful of us in there that were like, I know what that is. And, we were all excited. And then maybe like the, 2/3 of the chat is, it's snakes and stogies. So it's probably a bunch of snake nerds and a few cigar nerds. And there's a little bit of lizard crossover. And, so the chat kind of got a little bit quiet, and he would bring out something crazy. And then like 3 or 4 of us would be like, yeah, I know what that is, and be all excited. And then it would kind of not as much chat. And he'd get out the next box. I thought that was super cool. He's a good dude. I would look forward to talking to him more in the future. So that'll be fun. Wally had to duck out. Supreme Gecko. Make sure you guys check him out. I always enjoy talking to him. I see Wally more at Sewerfest. For those of you listening who are Wisconsin folks, that is actually coming up at the end of the summer, I believe. I've always been about leopard geckos, so I saw that interview. Yes, agreed. I get where people fall into that trap. Leopard geckos seem kind of boring, maybe because of, you know, their personality, I suppose, being crepuscular, a little slower. The majority of their popularity, I think, got bogged down in beginner species, which probably isn't necessarily all that true. But they make some beautiful morphs, and now that eublepharid localities and things like that are becoming more well known to folks, uh, you're getting kind of the best of both worlds. Of if you want a solid orange highlighter gecko, you can get one and keep it like a leopard gecko, which is super simple. Or you can get into these really weird, specific localities and really just nerd out on it, which is, I don't know. That's a cool way to do it. I feel like that will bring. I don't know how to say that. I feel like that will bring more quote unquote advanced people back to Eublepharis, which is good because it's. I always feel like it's a shame that people move past the beginner species. I wish more people. I I want people to treat it like a hobby and an art type hobby of a skill set, and so you become a more skilled and advanced keeper of lizards. Okay, and then culturally in herpetoculture, we feel like that means, oh, I'm kind of past keeping leopard geckos. I keep, you know, Uromastyx now, or I keep, chameleons, or I keep, I don't keep crestas anymore. I keep Saracenorum or lychees, whatever it is, and you feel like you've moved on, right? But if you had Phillips from Arids Only, if you had his skill level of Uromastyx and lighting and all the amazing things that he does, well, dude, let's see what he builds for a leopard gecko. I bet you it'd be ridiculous because he has the skill set. And so I I hope that localities and these type of things that are more intriguing to those of us who are farther down that experience chain. I hope that brings us back to these simpler, I get easier, however you want to explain it. The genera that folks kind of overlook. If you are, really skilled at doing pythons and building enclosures and understanding heat gradients and arboreal and hides and things, take all of that, put a corn snake in it, and then learn about plants. Make a Florida biotope in a carpet python sized cage and put a yellow rat in it, or like use those advanced skill sets and then apply them to quote unquote beginner species. And I think that could be a really solid avenue forward for the hobby. And I think that could help those advanced people of you learn these skill sets, or you learn planted things, or whatever it is the next step that you took, and then maybe if you went back to a species that had simpler requirements and started to build out your skill set, maybe you would see these things. You would see crepuscular leopard gecko activity with cryptic basking. If you learned how to do rocky setups and you use zoopoxy and you paint and do all the crazy stuff that I'm doing for iguanids and stuff, apply that to a rocky landscape for a regular leopard gecko to see how the spots in yellow work in, and then take those beginner species and keep them in an advanced ways. And I think that would help you learn more about your what we would call advanced skill set of, are you really awesome, or do you just know a lot about carpet pythons? Because if you're good at carpet pythons, you could keep any rat snake. Well, but can you? Or how do you apply those things? I think that could be a really good avenue for folks to kind of bounce back and forth to taking those steps forward and advancing their skill set in husbandry. kept Phelsuma. Yeah. So Dragon Lair says, I've kept Phelsuma for 28 years on and off. I'm just about done with them, ready to get into something new. Yeah. And so that's what I mean is you are so in on one grouping and you got it. You're down. These are my lights. This is my misting. These are my plants. Feed them this. Eggs pop out that end. And we're motoring. And then get weird with it. Or in maybe you only did Grandis and now you try Clemeri, or now you try, you're looking at, moving from something tropical like that to, oh, I'm good at arboreals, but I want to go dry. And let's look at Strophoris. Let's look at, how you do these different things and how you're going to take that next step. Or you're really good at keeping Phelsuma. And so you probably understand lighting and misting and planting and things like that, because they have some pretty specific tropical needs. Maybe try a Anolis species. Maybe drop the tropical portion and deck out something plant and mist for, something in the cresty type or something like that. There's different ways that you could take that skill set you've already learned and apply it to these other things that could be really cool. Been trying to find New Caledonian plants for garden. Whoa, yeah, that would be pretty cool. I am currently building a South American biotope that is going to be similar in structure to my really big iguana enclosure, but it's going to house some snakes instead. And I recently was messing around with Christmas cactus, and it turns out Christmas cactus are actually a mountain species of plant from Brazil. And so they can deal with cooler weather, and they can actually be planted in an almost epiphytic way with very little substrate. And so, weird thing I found out about that being a South American plant. So now I'm going to get a little crazy with some Christmas cactus in my South American biotope. But yeah, man, when you get weird on the plants, you can easily spend so much more money than you do on the animal. It's ridiculous. And especially if you're trying to find, area specific plants, it would almost be easier to find fake ones or like little models. Or I feel like that's something that maybe you could, I don't know enough about 3D printing, but I see a lot of weirdly 3D printed enclosure pieces. And I wonder if you could start to 3D print fake plants for this weird stuff that we're all keeping. Big into beard and crested. Yeah. And that's a big part of it too, is, knowing, so, you've tried beardeds and cresteds with someone else. That's not your jam. And that's part of it as well, is trying stuff out and just, nah, that didn't really do it for me. Whatever it may be, there's nothing wrong with that. Like we get weird about, if you get something, you should give it a good life and keep it, and they're, not disposable and no throwaway pets and things like that. And I believe all of that. I don't like the throwaway pet idea, and I do want folks to commit to them as, things that you are responsible for. But at the same time, that this is a hobby, and you try out things in a hobby and find out that you don't like that particular kind. It wouldn't matter what hobby it was. If you were into, my wife is into knitting and crocheting and things like that, and she tries out different stuff, and she'll make something in one pattern, or make it with this other company, or make this and she's like, yeah, I don't really care for that. And then she doesn't buy any more of whatever that is. She moves on to either something she had made in the past, or she tries, different things. And there's no reason that this hobby can't be in the same vein, as long as you move on in a responsible way. I want blue tree monitors. Being old and retired, I don't have that kind of money. Hey man, I am not old or retired, and I also don't have that kind of money. So I get it. No, I hear you on the blue tree monitors. They are an amazing species. But I mean, build out an enclosure, let the enclosure grow in, set up your biotope, do the whole thing in a shower stall, leave it for a year while you roll your pennies to get you a monitor. I I think that could be kind of cool. Treat treat bioactive enclosures like saltwater tanks. Saltwater tanks, you get a bunch of live rock, and man, I've seen people let that stuff sit for 6 months, and it's just in there growing algae with snails on it, and then 2 years later, full coral, crazy fish, so on and so forth. But it's expected to be a time intensive process. You know, why can't bioactives be that way? Um, yes, Christopher. For folks who are listening to the episode, Christopher in the chat is saying the YouTube channel Crime Pays, but Botany doesn't. They That guy is awesome. I strongly encourage folks who are listening to check out that channel. It is really good. He is so knowledgeable and hilarious. Like his sense of humor is exactly what you think it is with the title Crime Pays but Botany Doesn't. It's fantastic. And he says that he has a whole series in oh, holy cow, I did not know that. It says he has a whole series in New Caledonia. Very cool. I will absolutely be looking that up. Yeah, I encourage anybody, even if you know if you just do racks and paper towel, I don't care. That guy's funny, and it's worth your time to watch his channel. He's hilarious. But yeah, you said that plants open up a whole rabbit hole, and they do, but it it doesn't have to be crazy in depth. What if it's just a pothos, but you want to give it 3 months to grow in, so that your leaf tail gecko has something to hide? There's nothing that I don't have an issue with that. It isn't the instant gratification of buying something at NARBC, but maybe that gives you a better result. Yeah. Any folks in the chat were saying that Crime Pays Botany doesn't. He is totally self-taught. Yeah, he's very impressive. I'm a huge fan. Um, but no, like I don't see why more of us can't start keeping the way that dart frog keepers do. In that you build out your scape, whatever it may be, and then you just let it chill, month, 2, 3 months, whatever it may be. If you're trying to do something more in depth, drip walls, folks that are trying to do moss setups, paludariums, and things that are by their very nature, they're a little more advanced and time intensive. But some of those things need quite a bit of time because things like mosses and drip walls and stuff that you're trying to do for that can be a little more delicate, and so you want them to be more established before you put in an animal that could cause damage to them. Dart frog folks don't usually have to worry about that as much, so you could probably get away with shorter time frames, obviously. But if you were getting into something like, for me right now, that South America biotope that I'm building, I'm likely putting at the very least a pair of red tails that will live in the tree portion. I mean, they're big, heavy snakes, and they're kind of derpy because they're red tails. So they'll definitely try to use plants to climb and so on and so forth. So it's going to take some planning and giving those plants time to set up and do their own thing. And so, I don't think there's anything wrong with treating our naturalistic vivaria more like the saltwater hobby treats theirs. Um, I'm probably a little biased from that because I came from the saltwater hobby. So I understand the importance, and it teaches you patience because things like coral grow so slow. You can't be waiting for the next plant cutting or trying to get a head off this coral or whatever. It it just doesn't ever work that way. It's very rare that they would expand in a rapid way. Yeah, Christopher was saying, yeah, that's what I did. Let him establish for a few months. Yeah, I mean, if that's the style of keeping you're choosing, then that, that patience is only going to pay off, in my opinion. You are kind of stuck paying good money for lights, and you are kind of stuck having patience and building a schedule for watering, or paying good money for misting. Those there is a there is kind of a recipe for how to do a lot of those things. Um, Unfortunately, the tech and automation comes with a cost, but or the cost of self discipline for having a green thumb. Lots of weird. Yeah, New Caledonia, I could see having lots of weird plants. I mean, look at the weird lizards that come out of there. That makes sense to me. They have derpy velvet geckos with tails that fall off and fancy eyelashes. Like, I'm sure they have very strange plants all the same. Yeah, it's I don't know. It was a good time. I was very happy to see the crowds that were there. I hope everybody killed it on sales. I know the few folks that I talked to really did. They did very well. They were all very excited, and so it like I said before, it feels um, post COVID. I know that politically and whatever, we probably aren't uh, in that frame of mind, but this show at least felt like it, I suppose. And the auction was super successful for USARK. I was very glad to hear it. It was very nice to hear from the USARK Florida folks. Would just reiterate again, they are a separate organization from USARK. And so anybody who is listening that would like to support them, make sure you are looking them up separately. And if you want to become a member or donate or support in some way, USARK Florida actually is its own organization. And so that's something to bear in mind. They do work together, of course. USARK works on legislation involving the reptile hobby nationwide, but USARK Florida is specifically dedicated to the state and local legal infrastructure in Florida, which of course has been kind of crazy as far as reptiles go, uh, pretty much forever, but in recent history has gotten much worse, and they have a lot going on. They're very involved. The folks that were talking at the auction were, they're very passionate, just like everybody is that's there supporting USARK, and they have some of their own unique issues. But the lady who spoke actually did a pretty cool thing. She did kind of a show of hands and asked who kept reptiles that are from Florida or reptiles that are bred in Florida. And of course, bunches of people raised their hand, me included. And then she asked for a show of hands for people that lived in Florida. And there were like 6. All vendors, of course, or people who were there for USARK Florida and the event. And she would, it was just a very poignant way of expressing that that state provides a lot for herpeticulture. There are a lot of importers, there are a lot of breeders, it is central to the industry side of herpeticulture, and the legal battles that they face do have an effect on all of us. And so, they're such, it's complex enough, and it is involved enough that they created their own organization. And so it definitely bears looking at from our end, and support from our end. I obviously am not a Florida guy, but I am very aware of their importance to herpeticulture, and have bought numerous things from folks in Florida because they can keep stuff outside and breed that I just can't, because I live in a place where it snows. And so, when we all enjoy cold-blooded things that live in tropical, beautiful places, they at least have to start in tropical, beautiful places. And so we get kind of hamstrung there, and there are some major constraints with how our industry establishes animals in this country and where you can do that in a reasonable manner. And so it was just cool. It was cool to hear from her. Chris from Sea Serpents got up and spoke. He is part of their board and is very supportive of USARK Florida. And so it was nice to hear from them. I've actually heard Ron St. Pierre on a few podcasts lately. He also has been talking about the work that USARK Florida is doing. Obviously, he is heavily involved there as well. And so that was pretty cool. And Phil talked about USARK and all of the work that they are, of course, doing. And so, yeah, it was very informative. People were very supportive. It was really good. I was happy to see it. We are at an hour and 15, and that was pretty much my Tinley recap. So I think I'm going to wrap up this episode. As always, the banner around the top with the Herpetoculture Network and the Lizard Brain Radio logo and black box cages. Part of what I was doing at NARBC actually was talking to the VivTech folks and talking to Mike Stefani, because Mike is a purchase point for Zoopoxy. And so the black box cages enclosures that I was able to go pick up at the Show Me Show in Marietta, Georgia, I have plans to make I have a quad of enclosures, and my plans are to make a Australia quad with a pair of beardeds, a yellow Aki. I have a Brettles python and a woman python. And so I'm going to set up 4 different examples of Australian biotope that are going to be full spectrum lighting using VivTech UV. And I'm going to have all of my rockscape and structures I'm going to make out of Zoopoxy, which I've been having a lot of success with in my tropical stuff. So I'm going to build something more desert in those. My daughter and I nerded out talking to Justin and the folks at Black Box about all sorts of different enclosures and ideas for them going forward. So there could be more fun stuff on the horizon for them. I was super impressed, man, and I still am when I went and picked that stuff up, and I've been moving around the shop trying to decide how I want to place things. They make really cool stuff, and I had a lot of fun meeting them, and now I'm kind of gathering supplies and getting things together so I can put that together, and I really want to make a good showing for them because I really like their stuff, so I want to do a justice for what I build. So that should be a lot of fun. And like I said at the start of the episode, I have interviews scheduled all the way up until the start of July. So that's pretty cool. I'm running into weird things where like Mother's Day is the Sunday that it would have fallen on mine, and Father's Day, and different holidays and stuff. So I don't want to like interrupt other people's stuff for them to be my guest. And so I'm trying to schedule things to be accommodating of people's schedules. And so most of those I have worked out. There won't be an episode 2 weeks from today. There'll be an episode 3 weeks from today because I am traveling for work. And so I just figured it would be easier to line up at 3 weeks, and then we'll go back on our every other week schedule. And so it's the summertime, it's holidays, people have plans. And so I kind of schedule with my guests as I can schedule. Like I always tell you guys, I am very fortunate in that pretty much everybody I talk to is very supportive and very interested in coming on. And that continues. I continue to speak to folks who are very excited to come talk to you all and answer all of my ridiculous lizard questions. So we have a lot of fun with that. And that's about it. I will see you guys again in 3 weeks. Later.